what the Second Amendment is?
Possibly. Is that the gun control stuff? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, yeah.
Do you know what the Second Amendment is?
Yeah.
What is
It's basically the right to bear arms, and basically it's just that you have, I don't know really how to describe it other than it's the right to bear arms.
it? Okay, Reagan, do you know what the Second Amendment is?
No.
Do you know what the Second Amendment means?
No.
Do you know what the Second Amendment is?
The right to
Do you know
bear.
what the Second Amendment is?
No.
Amendment is. What is the Second Amendment?
The right to bear arms.
Okay, Kobe, what is the Second Amendment?
I have no clue.
Alright, what is the Second Amendment? What is the Second Amendment?
I don't know.
Okay, Tim, do you know what the Second Amendment is?
Yes.
What is it?
The gun.
Alright, Dalton, do you know what the Second Amendment is?
It is the right to bear arms, and that's so far all I know.
Second Amendment.
I don't know.
Okay, what is the Second Amendment?
I don't know.
Okay, Mitchell, do you know what the Second Amendment is?
The right to bear arms.
Hello everyone, my name's Alexis and behind the camera we have Anthony. For this video we will be discussing gun control. You just saw 15 different high school students being asked what the Second Amendment is, and this will be answered later on in the video. And what you will see is research portion discussing both sides of the issue, followed by interviews with two different high school students, McCall Schunke and Soucie, each on different sides of the issue, and then interview with Sheriff Hagen and then former police chief Mr. LaBeck. We hope you enjoyed the video. Now onto our research portion. Now remember we will be doing both sides. Starting with the pro side, we have the Second Amendment is not an unlimited right to own guns. Gun control laws are just as old or older than the Second Amendment, which was ratified in 1791. Some examples of gun control throughout colonial America included criminalizing the transfer of guns to Catholics, slaves, indentured servants, and Native Americans, regulating the storage of gunpowder in homes, banning loaded guns in Boston houses, and mandating participation in formal gathering of troops and door-to-door surveys about guns owned. In the June 26, 2008 District of Columbia, Heller, U.S. Supreme Court Majority Opinion, Justice Antonin Scalia wrote, "Like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. Nothing, in our opinion, should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms." On June 9th of 2016, the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled 7-14 that the right of the general public to carry the concealed firearm in public is not and never has been protected by the Second Amendment, thus upholding a law requiring a permitting process and good cause for concealed carry license in California. A 2018 study found that 91% of the 1,153 court cases with claims stating a government action or law violates the Second Amendment between the 2008 D.C. v. Heller decision and February 1st of 2016 failed. And now for the con side. The Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution protects individual gun ownership. The Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Gun ownership is an American tradition older than the country itself and is protected by the Second Amendment. More gun control laws would infringe upon the right to bear arms." Justice Antonin Scalia, in June 26 of 2008, District of Columbia v. Heller, U.S. Supreme Court Majority Opinion syllabus stated, "The Second Amendment protects an individual right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia. and to use that arm for traditionally lawful purposes such as self-defense within the home. The McDonald v. City of Chicago in 2010 ruling also stated that the Second Amendment is an individual right. Lawrence Hunter, chairman of stated the founders understood that the right to own and bear arms is as fundamental and as essential to maintaining liberty as are the rights of free speech, a free press, freedom of religion, and other protections against government encroachments on liberty delineated in the Bill of Rights. Now on the pro side, we have that more gun control laws would reduce gun deaths. There were about 464,000 total gun deaths between 1999 and 2013. 270,000 suicides, 174,000 homicides, and approximately 10,000 unintentional deaths by use of guns. Guns were the leading cause of death by homicide and by suicide. David from the Daily Beast and CNN contributor stated American children under age 15 were 9 times more likely to die of a gun accident than children in other advanced wealthy countries. About 200 Americans go to emergency rooms every day with gunshot wounds. A study published in the American Journal of Public Health found that legal purchase of a handgun appears to be associated with a long-lasting increased risk of violent death. According to a March 10, 2016, Lancet study, implementing federal universal background checks could reduce firearm deaths by a projected 56.9%. Background checks for ammunition purchases could reduce deaths by a projected 80.7%, and gun identification requirements could reduce deaths by a projected 82.5%. Gun licensing laws were associated with a 14% decrease in firearm homicides, while increase in firearm homicides were seen in places with right to carry and stand your ground laws. Now the con side is that gun control laws give too much power to the government and may result in government tyranny and the government taking away all guns from citizens. 57% of people surveyed by Pew Research in February 2013 said that gun control laws would give too much power to the government over the people. The NRA's Wayne LaPree stated, if you look at why our founding fathers put the Second Amendment there, they had lived under the tyranny of King George, and they wanted to make sure that these people in this new country would never be again and have to live under tyranny. Alex Jones, radio host, in a January 7, 2013 interview with Piers Morgan stated, the Second Amendment isn't there for duck hunting. It's there to protect us from tyrannical government and street thugs. 1776 will commerce again if you try to take our fire topic. For the pro side, we have a majority of adults, including gun owners, support common sense gun control as background checks, bans on assault weapons, and bans on high-capacity magazines. According to a February 20th, 2018 poll, 97% of American voters and 97% of gun owners support universal background checks. 67% support a nationwide ban on assault weapons, and 83% support mandatory waiting periods for gun purchases. As much as 40% of all gun sales are undocumented private party gun sales that do not require a background. 56% of all adults surveyed approve an assault weapon bans, and 53% of all adults surveyed approve of high-capacity magazine bans. 89% of adults with a gun in the home approve of laws to prevent the purchase of guns by mentally ill, and 82% approve of banning gun sales to people on no-fly lists. Don McClady, member of Hunters Against Gun Violence, stated, as a hunter and someone who has owned guns since I was a young boy, I believe that common sense gun legislation makes us all safer. Background checks prevent criminals and other dangerous people from getting guns. Now on the con side, we have that more gun control is unnecessary because relatively few people are killed by guns. According to the CDC's leading causes of death reports, between 1999 and 2013, Americans were 21.5 times more likely to die of heart disease, 18.7 times more likely to die of malignant tumors, and 2.4 times more likely to die of diabetes, or 2.3 times more likely to die of Alzheimer's than to die from a firearm, whether by accident, homicide, or suicide. The flu and related pneumonia, traffic accidents, and poisoning, whether via accident, homicide, or suicide, all killed more people between 1999 and 2013 than firearms. Firearms were the 12th leading cause of deaths for all Americans between 1999 and 2013, responsible for 1.3 deaths with 464,000 deaths. Internationally, the claim that the United States has a major problem with firearm homicide is exaggerated. The United States is ranked 28 in international homicide rates with 2.97 gun murders per 100,000 people in 2012. And for the next topic, we have the pro side, which states that more gun control leads to fewer suicides. Between 1999 and 2013, there were 270,237 firearms suicides in the United States, accounting for about 52% of all suicides during those years. According to March 2014 study, when gun ownership went down in the United States, overall suicide rates went down. Firearm-related suicides accounted for 61% of gun deaths in the United States between 2000 and 2010. A December 29 study found general barrier in firearm access created through state regulation can have a significant deterrent effect on male suicide rates in the United States. Permit requires and bans on sales to minors were most affected of the regulations in Indiana and Connecticut after red flag laws to remove guns from people who may pose threat were enacted. Gun suicides decreased by 7.5% and 13.7% respectively. While suicides by other means did not decrease during these times, a person who wants to kill him or herself is unlikely to commit suicide with poison or a knife when a gun is. And now for the con side. Gun control laws and lower gun ownership rates do not prevent suicides. Lithuania has one of the world's lowest gun ownership rates, but its suicide rate was 45.06 per 100,000 people in 1999, the highest suicide rate among 71 countries with available information. Japan has low gun ownership rate at 0.6 guns per 100 people and a high suicide rate of 18.41 suicides per 100,000 people in 1977, ranking 11 out of 71 countries. South Korea has a low gun ownership rate but has a high rate of suicide and the highest rate of gun suicides, approximately 12.63 per 100,000 people in 1997. By contrast, the United States has the 26th highest suicide rate, about 12.3 suicides per 100,000 people in 2011, and the highest gun ownership rate of 88.8 guns per 100 people. Jim Barnett, author of TheTruthAboutGuns.com, stated, "The theory that the restriction or elimination of guns would have a positive effect on the overall suicide rate in the U.S. does not hold up under scrutiny." Okay, and now for the last topic on the pro side. Enacting gun control laws such as mandatory safety features would reduce the number of accidental gun deaths. Approximately 50% of unintentional fatal shootings were self-inflicted, and most unintentional firearm deaths were caused by friends or family members. According to the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence and the National Physicians Alliance, states with the highest concentration of guns have 9 times the amount of accidental gun deaths, and 89% of unintentional shooting deaths of children occur in the home. And most of these deaths occur when children are playing with a loaded gun in their parents' absence. The U.S. General Accountability Office estimated that 31% of total accidental shooting deaths could have been prevented by installing safety devices on guns. 100% of deaths per year in which a child under 6 years old shoots and kills him or herself or another child could be prevented by automatic child-proof safety locks. And 23% of accidental shooting deaths by adolescents and adults per year could be prevented by loading indicators showing when a bullet was in the chamber ready to be fired. Marjorie Sinofilo, who has a PhD, professor of psychology at Eureka College, who has researched children's behavior around guns, stated, "We put gates around swimming pools to keep children from drowning. We put safety caps on medications to keep children from poisoning themselves. Because children are naturally curious and impulsive, and because we have shown time and time again we cannot gun-proof them with education, we have a responsibility to keep guns out of the hands of children." And on the con side, more gun control is not needed. Education about guns and gun safety is needed to prevent accidental gun deaths. 95% of all U.S. gun owners believe that children should learn about gun safety. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. And people need more gun education and mental illness screening to prevent massacres. The Sporting Arms and Ammunition Manufacturers Institute and Corporation stated, "Whether in the field, at the range, or in the home, a responsible and knowledgeable gun owner is rarely involved in a firearms accident of any kind." On the con side, more gun control is not needed. Education about guns and gun safety is needed to prevent accidental gun deaths. 95% of all U.S. gun owners believe that children should learn about gun safety. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. And people need more gun education and mental illness screening to prevent massacres. The Sporting Arms and Ammunition Manufacturers Institute and Corporation stated, "Whether in the field, at the range, or in the home, a responsible and knowledgeable gun owner is rarely involved in a firearms accident of any kind." Heidi Safili, former program manager of the NRA's Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program, stated, "Gun education is the best way to save young lives." The NRA states that the Eddie Eagle program is not meant to teach whether guns are good or bad, but rather to promote the protection and safety of children. Like swimming pools, electrical outlets, matchbooks, and household poison, there are guns treated simply as a fact of everyday life. According to Kyle Winstern, managing editor of Guns and Ammo Studies, show that children taught about firearms and their legitimate uses by family members have much lower rates of delinquency than children in households without guns, and children introduced to guns associate them with freedom, security, and reaction, not violence. Thanks for watching this portion of the video. Now on to the interviews.
My name is McCall Schunke, and I'm a senior at Watsika.
So what experience do you have with guns?
I have not very much experience with guns at all, really.
How about your family? Do they have any experience?
No.
So you've never been like introduced or even held or shot one?
No.
Do you think there should be a law banning U.S. citizens from buying and possessing semi-automatic and automatic weapons?
I do, because I just don't feel like they're necessary in order. I know a lot of people feel like they're necessary to protect yourself, but I just feel like there are other ways that are less aggressive to protect yourselves.
So what other ways would you say would be more helpful than?
Basically, I just think that people could, if for their homes to protect themselves, they could install like alarm systems and have like the police on speed dial and stuff so that they can protect themselves in better ways.
Do you think there should be a law banning the sale and possession of bump stocks or any other devices that would convert a weapon to semi or automatic status?
Yes, because I just don't feel like it's necessary. Like, I understand that guns can be used in other ways besides harming others, like they can be used for hunting and stuff, but I just don't think it's necessary for guns to be able to shoot off more than one bullet at a time.
Do you think the sale and possession of gun silencers should remain?
They should be illegal because, once again, I feel like if people want to use guns, they shouldn't be used like for wanting to hurt people. Maybe like hunting or whatever is fine to use a gun, but for hunting I don't really think it's necessary to use a silencer because, yeah.
Do you think background checks for people wanting to buy weapons should be expanded to gun shows and internet sales and include mental health histories?
I do think that they should, because there are various ways that people can get a hold of a gun. And I think that all of these different ways that they can buy a gun or use a gun or whatever, they should have some type of background check, and definitely include mental, what did you say?
I said mental health histories.
Yes, they should include mental health histories, because even though some people may have been taking medications or whatever, they could stop and it could still harm their mental capability of handling a gun.
Do you think they should have like psychiatrists check their mental health status? Because some people might not have a history.
Yes, I feel like before you buy a gun, there should be some type of, you should have a record of going to see a psychiatrist and like them saying that yes, you are mentally capable of handling a gun.
Do you think the prohibition against computerizing the National Gun Registry should be reserved, and this would allow law enforcement agencies to effectively track criminal gun activity?
Yes, I do think this should be a thing that people can look at, because I feel like if more people were aware of the individuals that have guns, they would know how to better prepare themselves if ever in a situation that they need to.
And then my last question's a little personal, but do you think if you were in a situation where you felt harmed, do you think a gun would be necessary, and would you use it?
If me personally, like if I was by myself, I would probably not be as, I wouldn't probably want to use a gun as much, but if it like was my family and they were in harm's way, I would be more into the idea of using a gun to protect them.
And then do you think you will ever own a gun or possess it?
I do not think I will ever own a gun.
And then anything else you'd like to say? Thank you.
I'm Andrew Soucie, junior at WCHS.
What experience do you have with guns, Andrew?
I've grown up with firearms most of my life.
So, you and your family, do you go hunt together?
We go on hunting, we go shooting. I go shooting just about every other weekend since as young as I can remember. Not every other weekend, but just about.
So who introduced you to guns?
Oh boy, probably either my grandfather or my dad.
And how many would you say you have in your house?
That's a lot. Yeah, I couldn't put a number on that.
Just guess.
I really couldn't put a number on it.
So too many to count?
I'd say that, yeah, sure.
Okay. Do you think there should be a law banning U.S. citizens from buying and possessing semi-automatic and automatic weapons?
Currently there is a law preventing automatic weapons. You have to have a class 3, I believe, in order to possess automatic weapons, but the thought of banning semi-automatics is kind of controversial to me, because most weapons out there are semi-automatic. I mean, all you have is really lever action, pump action, and bolt action aside from that. And I feel like the overall goal of some people is to take away those weapons as well, and by taking away semi-automatics, that takes a large portion out of that, and I don't think that's right.
Do you think there should be a law banning the sale and possession of bump stocks or any other devices that would convert a weapon to semi or automatic status?
So for those of you who don't know, bump stock, obviously it's a mechanism on a weapon that makes you fire a little bit faster. It's still a semi-automatic function because your finger is technically hitting the trigger every time. It's pretty much just using recoil. You can actually replicate the entire process without a bump stock by holding it to your hip. It's kind of complicated to explain, but I could honestly see either way on that side, because there's no really point for it, because it does decrease accuracy a lot because you're not holding the weapon firmly to your shoulders. So I can see either side on that.
Do you think the sale and possession of gun silencers should remain illegal?
Isn't it, what is it, like 42 states where it's legal? Is that what it is? Something like that.
It's illegal in Illinois.
Yeah, in Illinois. Okay, gotcha. I can see other side on that too. I think that on that question, I don't feel like they're a huge problem, and I think don't quote me on this, but I think 42 states allow them. So if 42 other states are allowing them, I don't understand why Illinois would be one of those states who wouldn't. And yet again, I don't know if it's 42. I'm just throwing numbers out there. I think that's what it is, though.
Do you think background checks for people wanting to buy weapons should be expanded to gun shows and internet sales and include mental health histories?
Background checks are actually required for gun shows and online gun buying places, I guess. I don't know how to go about saying that, but yeah, in order to sell weapons, you have to have a gun license, and if you have a gun license, you're required to give out background checks in order to sell those weapons.
How about the the mental health aspect?
I think there's some sort of mental health that goes on, but I don't see a point in that. I mean, if you've got a clean background, yeah.
So you don't think psychiatrists should evaluate people wanting to buy guns?
If there's a severe problem, then I think that they'll know about that, I guess, and that should be definitely taken into consideration.
Do Do you think the prohibition against computerizing the National Gun Registry should be reversed? This would allow law enforcement agencies to effectively track criminal gun activity.
So we were talking about how like this could also allow citizens to see other people's registration and weapons and whatnot. You know, you talked about, what was it, you know, felons being able to see the felonies of other people. I don't see it that civilians should be able to track other civilians' weapons because of the fact that owning a weapon is not a crime. So that's kind of law enforcement officers and whatnot having access to that. I feel like that'd be okay because of the fact that, you know, tracking criminal weapons is obviously a good thing. But the only problem with that I see is that you can't trace illegal weapons. I mean, people can make these firearms untraceable, and that's the problem I have with that. So.
And then, do you understand why people would feel unsafe around guns and being involved with guns?
I feel like I know people have different stories, you know, different experience with weapons, but growing up with firearms, I think that just getting a basic knowledge of firearms and I don't know, understanding them and understanding how they can help and can definitely be an eye opener for people who don't, I guess. So honestly, I'm not quite sure why people don't like guns, I guess. Yeah. What do you
And
think?
then, anything else you'd like to add or say you can?
Not right now, you know.
Hi, I'm Sheriff Hagen with the Iroquois County Sheriff's Office. I'm been a police officer for 26 years and have been sheriff for 8 years, starting my third term December 1st.
Okay, so what are the steps or requirements to legally own a gun?
In Illinois, you have to apply for what's called a FOID card, and that's Firearm Owner's Identification Card, and that is done through the Illinois State Police. That process easily is done on the internet. You download a form, you fill the form out, you answer questions, you attach a picture with it, you submit that to the state police. They do whatever checks they do on the individual at that time, and then if they have approved that application, they send you the card. It's like the size of a driver's license. And in Illinois, in order to possess firearms or ammunition or buy firearms or ammunition, you have to have a firearm owner identification card.
Are law enforcement agencies able to effectively track criminal gun activity?
Yes, that's done a couple different ways. One is the FBI collects statistics every year on a uniform crime reporting form that I believe every police agency in the United States submits to them. Since gun violence has caught more of the national attention in the last decade or so, there have been more requirements of reporting gun violence. So the federal government right now through the FBI is collecting those statistics, and then once they get them compiled, they send them out to law enforcement agencies and anyone else who is interested on it.
How are gun records stored?
A couple different ways. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms deals with licensing what's called federal firearm licensees. An individual who wants to own a gun shop or sell guns as part of their livelihood to make money goes through requirements and application process and background checks through the ATF. Once they are approved to be a federal firearms licensee, any transactions that they have requirements through the ATF to record dates, names of individuals who have bought guns, makes, models, serial numbers, and all of that stuff. As a private citizen, you can also sell guns from one person to another, and most of those requirements fall on the private citizens as well. So for instance, if a private citizen in Illinois wanted to sell a firearm to another private citizen, they would initially go on the state police website and fill out a form for a firearm transfer. that the person selling the gun is also responsible for having a criminal background check done on the individual. And if everything is in line and everything is okay for that transaction to occur, then the person who sells the gun keeps as a record for a minimum 10 years the date, the name of the person they sold the firearm to, make, model, serial number, and all that. So they're required to keep that by law.
What is the National Instant Background Check System?
That is a system that was set in place by the federal government in 1998. And what it does is anybody who is a federal firearm licensee that is selling guns to individuals has to make a call, or they make an inquiry to the system. They provide the information of the person that is applying to buy the firearm, and when that system gives them the information back, it will indicate whether or not that person is eligible or not to buy a firearm. That is something too that as a private citizen, when they do a background check on a private gun deal from one private citizen to another, they are also required to do this national background check. And it is information that, again, is compiled by the federal government on individuals, which would give an indication as to whether or not they're eligible or not to purchase a firearm.
How often are guns used in self-defense?
That is a very tricky question, or I guess an answer for that question, being several factors. One is there's a lot of times that a gun is used in self-defense or for protection that aren't reported. And what I mean by that is someone may be trying to break into an individual's house while they are home, or someone may be trying to break into a garage or their car or whatever, and an individual comes outside and is armed, and the person flees. The firearm is never discharged. There's never an incident where someone gets hurt from that, but some would argue that because the homeowner or the property owner was armed, being armed discouraged the crime from being committed. So a lot of times things like that don't get reported. And statistics are up or down depending on what side of the gun issue you're on. If you're pro-gun, you find statistics that show that having citizens being armed prevents violent crime, and that crime goes down. And then if you're on the anti-gun side of the argument, you come up with statistics that show that citizens who are armed, that more incidents of shootings are happening. And one of the things that they will show in that is they will say that these individuals who are armed, these private citizens that are armed, aren't properly trained. And so one of the things in Illinois is there's a concealed carry permit, which individuals, private citizens, can carry a firearm concealed. And it is a process they have to go through. They have to fill out an application. If that is approved, they have to go through training, not only how to use the weapon, how to safely carry the weapon, but also use of force incidences on. If this incident happens in front of me and I'm armed, can I use force that would cause great bodily harm or death? And so most states will do that with concealed carry. They'll have some type of training or education. It varies on the number of hours or days that happens, but most states will have that. So I don't have a specific answer how often guns are used in self-defense. I do know that they are on a regular basis throughout the United States, that a private citizen who is armed either prevents a crime from happening or gets involved in a situation where, because they are armed, they prevent someone from hurting others.
How much gun violence is there in Iroquois County and then in Illinois as a whole?
There is very little gun violence in Iroquois County, which we are very happy with. We do have situations where, over the years we have had armed robberies where people have robbed gas stations or businesses and have been armed with a firearm. our last homicide was 2 years ago. That was committed with a firearm. So in Illinois, there's a very low percentage of crimes being committed with a gun. As far as Illinois goes, it fluctuates, and it fluctuates primarily because of Chicago. Most of the homicides and most of the gun crimes that are committed in the state of Illinois, the higher percentages out of the Chicago metropolitan area. So right now, I believe overall crime was on a downward turn for the last decade. It's kind of been going down. There's been some peaks where certain things have, shootings for instance in Chicago, have fluctuated. 1 year they're up, then they're down a little bit, then they're up, then they're down. But Iroquois County, very little gun crime. As far as the state goes, there are some spots. Some of the downstate areas I know have seen increases in gun crimes and shootings, Champaign-Urbana being one of them. They've had a number of homicides and shootings over the last couple of years. Danville, Bloomington, Peoria, places like that. But statistically, overall, the last decade or so, crime has gone down, but there have been some peaks of different crimes. 1 year they're up, next year they're down, and it kind of does the roller coaster ride.
And then the last question, what could be done to reduce gun violence?
A lot of things could be done. One is education. Educate people on what guns can do, and how to safely operate guns. Because one of the things that most statistics don't show is the vast majority, or I'm going to say 60% or so, of gun deaths in the United States are suicides. So it's an individual who commits suicide by the use of a firearm. So educating people about firearms is one way. As far as gun violence, states that seem to have stiffer sentencing penalties with people who commit crimes with guns tend to see a decrease in gun violence. Some states, for instance, may be if you commit a certain crime, you're looking at between 6 and 30 years in prison. However, if it's committed with a firearm, there's an automatic addition onto that. Could be 10 years. Illinois has a 25-year add-on right now. So someone who, we'll just use Illinois for instance, someone who commits a murder in Illinois with a firearm, they look at a normal range of between 20 and 60 years. Because of that firearm being used, they could potentially look at a 45 to 80 years type, or 85 years range of sentencing. Some folks believe that if you put stiffer sentencing guidelines on offenses with guns, that you're going to see a decrease in violent crime. But I believe education is a big part of it. We have neighborhoods throughout the country that crime is committed. It's not stranger on stranger type thing. It's gang driven. It's could be drug driven. Anything like that, where there are neighborhoods in these metropolitan areas where the majority of shootings are happening and gun violence is happening in those communities, and it's driven because of, for the most part, money. It might be drugs. It might be whatever else those individuals in those areas are doing to make money for themselves. And because there's competition, they choose to use guns to eliminate their competition. Whether or not going into those neighborhoods and educating those people would have a direct effect on it, I think anybody who comes up with a plan and says educating is the way to do it, there'll be those who are saying, well, we've tried that and it hasn't worked. Others will say tougher sentencing guidelines, and there will be those that say we've tried it and worked. So I think it's just a mixture. It's getting people to come to the table and sit down and figure out. It might be a little bit of everything that finally gets gun violence to go down throughout the country. Another big part of it is folks who are allowed to carry concealed. There are statistics out there that show that violent crimes will go down, because people who are committing those crimes aren't sure if the person they're going to go up to, and maybe they're going to what's a strong armed robbery, where they're going to go up to an individual, take a woman's purse, or grab a man's wallet or watch or something like that. If those individuals aren't sure if that person is armed or not, they may be less likely to approach a person and commit that crime. So I think it's a mixture of everything involved, but we definitely need to come up with something to reduce gun violence across the United States.
Hello, my name is Roger LaBeck. A little background on me: I was with the Watseka Police Department for 27 years and 11 years as the chief of police. I do own several guns myself, and I try to keep up on the gun laws, not only as a police officer, but also for personal information. So I'll do my best to answer your questions. So.
What gun control law currently exists?
There are a lot of gun control laws right now. Probably the biggest one that has the biggest effect is the Federal Gun Control Act of 1968. That's still in force. And when you talk about, there's hundreds actually of gun control laws on the books. So a lot of these won't be yes and no answers. So yeah. So.
And then please explain the Second Amendment.
Okay, the Second Amendment, and I'll read it to you. I wrote it down. It says, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's what it says. Obviously, the issues you get into is how do you interpret that. Not too long ago, there was a Heller case and a McDonald case in Chicago and Illinois that talked about whether or not this actually went to the rights of individuals, because it does say a well-regulated militia, comma, and then the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma. The definition of the people, is that the people as a group or the people as an individual? And those cases have tend to lead it towards it is actual individuals who have the rights to keep and bear firearms. So.
Is a background check required to purchase a firearm, even in gun shows and internet sales?
Yes, background checks are always required. There's a federal background check that's required. Nowadays it's done over the phone basically and immediately, but also when you purchase a firearm from a federal firearms dealer, there's a 4473 form that has to be filled out, and there's I think it's up to like 16 questions now. Are you the actual purchaser of this firearm? In other words, are you buying this to get it to someone else who can't own one? So that's one of the questions. A lot of the others are, if you're dishonorably discharged from the military, have you had a felony conviction? Do you do drugs? So that's part of it. The background check, the instant background check, is where your information is phoned in. In our case, it's the state police in Illinois, and they do a background check on you to see whether or not you're a convicted felon, whether or not there's any issues that you have that would keep you from owning a firearm. And now, recently, it's if there's any active order of protections also. So there are background checks, whether or not you're at a gun show, whether you're at a gun dealer, a gun shop, or someone who just has a federal firearms license and sells out of their house. Also, recently, it's a couple years ago now, private transactions have to be checked. So if I'm going to sell you a gun, you have to have an FOID card. I run the numbers on the state police website of your FOID card, and then it gives me an approval number that says, yes, you can sell this person a gun, and that approval number is good for 30 days. That didn't used to be the case, but for a few years now, and that a lot of that is because of order protection, because I get an order of protection issued against me today, my FOID card doesn't dissolve. I'm supposed to turn it in to the local police. And if I hold that, say I lost it, I show it to you, so, oh, it must be good because you got it. Well, that's not necessarily the case. So those are some of the background checks. So.
Is it possible to look up the age or medical history of someone who bought a gun?
If I'm just trying to get information on someone who bought a gun, that's kind of protected information. However, to sell someone a gun, a long gun, you need to be 21 for me to sell you one as a private citizen. 18. You have to be 18. A private citizen sale, I can sell you a handgun if you're 18, but a federal firearms licensed dealer cannot sell a handgun to anyone who is under 21. So there's a little discrepancy there, okay? But otherwise, so I have to know your age for that part of it. You have to show me documentation of how old you are so I can not violate the law. And part of that now is through these background checks, like with the incident where you phone it in or you get a hold of state police, they would say this person's too young. So the medical history, that's covered under HIPAA, that's a little more difficult. Now, law enforcement can get that, courts can get that, but just to a private citizen, that's probably not going to happen. So,
Is there a law banning citizens from buying and possessing semi-automatic and automatic weapons?
okay. The terms semi-automatic and automatic are quite often confused. The term semi-automatic means that every time you pull the trigger one time, the gun fires one time, the trigger must be released and then pulled again to fire the second time. Automatic means I pull the trigger back and the gun cycles and fires without me letting up on the trigger. Okay, so when you hear a lot of people saying we need to ban automatic weapons, well, automatic weapons are banned, have been since before the 1968 Gun Act, and in 1933, I believe. However, you can get a Class 3 federal firearms license, which means you can own, possess, and use fully automatic weapons. The transfer of fully automatic weapons is highly regulated. When I was police chief, we had 2 rifles that had the automatic function, and I decided we had no need for them. I wanted to trade them off to someone who had a federal firearms license, Class 3. I did that, but it took several months. I had to file the paperwork with the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They had to approve the sale, they had to oversee the sale, so there's a ban on fully automatics. Now, some states are a little more lenient than others on it, but the semi-automatics are, for the most part, are legal for anyone to own. The fully automatics, no. So.
Is there a law banning the sale and possession of bump stocks? And then also please explain what bump stocks are, or other devices that convert a weapon to semi or automatic status.
The bump stock issue is something that was kind of a loophole in the automatic weapons, because the other devices you're talking about to sell, to convert a weapon to fully automatic changes the internal parts so that when you pull the trigger, you no longer get just one round per trigger pull. It allows it to continually fire. That's the fully automatic. Those are illegal without a Class 3 federal firearms license. The bump stock thing was a mechanical device that would attach to the stock, as you would see, but what it did, it allowed the gun to recoil, and then your finger, because of the momentum, would come off the trigger, the gun would jump forward, and that would automatically pull the trigger. So you're technically still only getting one shot per trigger pull. So that's why there was a loophole for those now. And there's legislation in the process, and I'm not sure if it's passed yet or not, but that would outlaw that. So that's how that kind of got around the law. Same effect with the weapon, but a different mechanical device. So.
Are gun silencers illegal, and then why or why not?
Gun silencers are illegal in some states. They are legal in other states. There's a federal law covering those. Illinois does not allow silencers. Indiana and several other states do. However, you must comply with the federal laws. It's a $700 tax stamp plus an application fee. You have to have background checks to go through. And it's my understanding then if you get a silencer, there have to be serial numbered, and then also that silencer can only be on whatever individual gun that you want to use it on, so you can't move it around to different guns. So all that paperwork is, quite, it takes quite a bit of paperwork and fees to do that. Why have they been illegal? It's been kind of considered an assassin's tool. You know, I can shoot someone from a distance and no one knows. The other side of the coin is that a lot of states allow them because firearms are very loud and a lot of people have hearing damage from shooting firearms, and you know, it's much quieter. It's not like you see on TV where you can't hear it at all. It's still very, especially in a rifle, it's still quite loud, but it is below the threshold that it's going to damage your hearing. And then hunters would also say, well, if I could use a silencer, then the animals won't hear, and I would be able to, you know, be more effective in my hunting. So.
And then the last question, what could be done to reduce gun violence?
I guess that's the big question. How do we reduce gun violence without stepping on someone's rights? You know, that's something that's been debated quite a bit here recently, and I don't know. The answer, I guess, is it's going to be really hard to do. You want to keep guns out of the hands of people who aren't responsible and who intend to use them illegally. But how do you know that in advance? You know, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't say how to do that. Certain guns, like fully automatic, you know, that's a step in the right direction. There are other certain guns that an average citizen probably, you know, would have no use for, legal use. But the hard part is how do you keep that from happening? If you, in my opinion, if you have someone who is going to be willing to violate the law of God and man, that thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder, what other law can you pass that's going to deter them from it? You know, but we need to work on, I guess, education partly, and then somewhat on the medical side, which is hard, but with the mental health side, I think we're making strides in that direction, but it's just not an easy question, and not an easy answer.
We want to thank Andrew, McCall, Mr. Hagen, and Mr. LaBeck for being part of this video. We hope you all enjoyed it and learned something today, that you can see other people's viewpoints and hopefully are more open-minded. Make sure to check the description, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Read that word.
Just make it up, no one knows.
Scroll up, please. It's really not that hard.
No. This is number 5. I meant to put number 6, so.
So we were supposed to do 5. In India and Connecticut. What is that? I'm so sorry. You're gonna have to edit this. Subjugated. Yeah, sorry. India and Connecticut. India and Connecticut. India and Connecticut. Now for.
I have to stand.